Many years ago, there lived a beautiful young lady called Ene. Ene was a hairdresser and was married to the love of her life, Oche, who was a driver. And although they earned just enough to take care of themselves, they were very much in love. Their love was love at first sight. They had been lovers since secondary school, and immediately they had learned a trade after their secondary school education, they both got married. Their love was so sweet and beautiful to behold that even couples that were richer than them wanted to be like them. They wanted to have what they had. Ene and Oche had always dreamt of having only 2 children, a girl first, then a boy. So it was no surprise that barely 6 months after they got married, Ene found out that she was pregnant. Oche came back from work one day when Ene broke the good news to him and said, "Oche, I am pregnant." Oche was so happy. So I'm going to be a father. Oche screamed in excitement. And from that day onwards, Oche no longer allowed Ene to do any housework. He cooked for her, he cleaned the house, and literally did all the work in the house. Ene was so happy, not just because of how her husband loved and treated her, especially now during pregnancy, but also because the other women in her compound envied her. They would sometimes even approach her and say, Ene, please, what did you give your husband? What did you put in his stew that he loves you this much like this? Please give me small now. Take me to the Baba that did what he did for your husband. Please. Her neighbor, Chinaza, will say to Ene, and she would blush and say, "I did not do anything, no. My husband just loves me. It's God's grace." Ene would reply, blushing. Oche never missed any antenatal appointments. He always followed Ene to every single doctor's appointment. He really loved his wife. Oche and Ene were so happy when they found out they were having a baby girl. Their plan of having a daughter first was about to come to pass. They had already even given her a name, Ochanya, meaning queen or princess. So Oche continued to pamper his wife all through the pregnancy while anticipating the arrival of their baby girl, Ochanya. So one fateful night, Ene and Oche were asleep when she began to feel some slight cramps in her stomach, and then she knew that it was time for her princess to arrive. So she woke her husband Oche up, and he quickly rushed her to the hospital. While Ene was wheeled into the labor room, Oche could be seen pacing around the hospital looking very worried. He was excited at the thought of being a father, but worried that nothing should go wrong. A few minutes later, the doctor came out and looked at Oche and said, "Congratulations, your wife just gave birth to a beautiful baby girl." "Oh, thank you so much, doc. Thank you so much, doctor," Oche said, sounding very excited. Then he realized that the doctor was not smiling. So he asked, "What is it, doctor? Why are you not happy?" "Wait, how is my wife doing?" Oche asked, starting to get worried. "Well, I'm so sorry, sir, but we just realized that you're also having a second baby, and your wife is yet to deliver her, and it's not looking good at all. We need to do surgery now. Your wife is getting really weak," the doctor said, looking worried. Oche could not believe his ears. "Doc, a second baby? Please, do anything to save my wife. I don't care if the second child dies or not. But please, nothing must happen to my wife. That woman in there is my life," Oche said, crying and pleading with the doctor. And after the doctor went back to attend to Ene, Oche kept on crying and praying so hard. He had never prayed the way he prayed in his entire life. He begged God to save his wife, saying, "Please, God, do not let Ene die. Please, I promise, if you save my wife's life, I will give you 1 million naira during our child dedication. I will sell my bus. I will give you all the money realized from the sale," Oche said, crying. However, after what seemed to be like eternity, the doctor came out looking all gloomy and very sad, and then said, "I'm sorry, but we lost Ene. We tried all our possible best, but it was too late, the doctor said sadly. No, no, doctor, please do something. Please, my wife cannot die like that, Oche said, crying like a baby. But Ene was dead and gone, and there was nothing that could be done. Oche wept and wept bitterly. So a few hours later, Oche, with tears in his eyes, left the hospital with his first daughter, Ochania. He did not even care to know the sex of the second baby. He was very upset. He did not want anything to do with the second baby, so he abandoned the baby at the hospital. As far as he was concerned, that second baby had killed his wife. He wished the second baby had died rather than his wife. His world had come crashing down. So it was later in the evening that the nurses in the hospital had traced Oche's house and brought his second baby home, saying, Oga, you forgot your second child now. You forgot your child at the hospital. Nurse Emma said, looking worried. I don't want anything to do with that witch that killed my wife. We were expecting only one girl all through the time we went for antenatal. Nobody ever told us we were having two babies. Now this one has come from nowhere and killed my wife. I hate her. I don't want to ever see this baby again, Oche said, weeping profusely. Oche was broken at the loss of his beloved wife Ene, and he blamed her death on the second twin. But after all that was said and done, the nurse had to leave the second twin with her father, saying, Oga, na your pikin o, na your pikin be this. You know if you leave am for hospital, anything wey you wan do with am, do, but na your pikin, Nurse Emma said, as she handed over the second twin to Oche. And that marked the beginning of the hatred Oche developed for his second child. So whereas he named his first baby Ochania, meaning princess, he named their second baby Achieni, meaning the unexpected. So Oche began to show more preference to Ochania. If Ochania and Achieni were both crying, he would rather pick Ochania and cuddle her while he left Achieni to cry. He would usually feed Ochania very well first and then give Achieni the leftovers of Ochania's food. Their neighbors and everyone around him knew that he loved Ochania and hated Achieni, and they all took pity on Achieni. Some of the men had even tried speaking to him about how he treated his second daughter unfairly, saying, Oche, children are gifts from the Lord. It is not your daughter Achieni's fault that her mother died during delivery. She had no hand in the death of her mother. And you need to stop treating her like she's a second-class citizen in her own father's house. The men in his compound will say to him, it is her fault, oh, and I will treat her as I please. She should have died instead of my wife, Oche would reply, crying. So Oche continued to maltreat his second daughter Achieni while he pampered Ochania to stupor. A few years later, Ochania and Achieni were already 10 years old, and whereas Ochania was dressed very beautifully and enjoyed the love and attention of her father at all times, Achieni was always sad and always looked unhappy and was very afraid of her father. Achieni was living like a maid in her father's house. Her father, Oche, only took Ochania with him to outings while Achieni stayed at home, crying and weeping. Achieni was the one that would sweep, clean the home and do all the house chores, while Ochania would sit in the parlor sitting pretty and watching television. Achieni was also the brighter one, but she had to do Ochania's assignments for her, and during exams her father had warned her to always write Ochania's name on her examination script. So while Ochania would usually come first at the end of the term, Achieni would always come either 15th, 17th or 20th, because while Achieni would always write Ochania's name on her examination paper, Ochania would have to do same on her own paper. But because she was not so intelligent as Achieni, so Achieni would always come 15th or 16th in the class. So Acheni grew up knowing that her father did not love her and that her twin sister Ochania was not willing to share the love of her father with her. So Ochania even began to maltreat Acheni too. In no time, Acheni turned to food, as that was the only thing that gave her some sort of comfort. So each time she picked up a plate of food to eat, she was so happy. And before you know it, Acheni began to grow very fat. A few years later, Ochani and Acheni had both graduated from secondary school and were ready to go to the university. But Oche allowed only Ochania to apply to the university, and because he knew that Ochania was not so intelligent, he had to bribe a few persons so they could give his beloved daughter Ochania admission into the university. But Oche refused Acheni from going to the university. Acheni was so broken. She cried and cried. She even begged her father, but her father still refused. So while Ochania went to the university, Acheni had to stay back home doing nothing but cleaning and cooking after her father like a mermaid. Ochania was so sad, so she continued to eat even more food, as food was the only thing that gave her solace. Her father would usually abuse and insult her at the slightest provocation, saying, "Look at you, see how fat and ugly you are. I wish you had died instead of your mother." So Acheni continued like this for the next 4 years, enduring all the abuse and insult that her father and sister rained on her. A few years later, Ochania had graduated from the university, and although she graduated with a 3rd class amidst all the school sortings and briberies that her father had to pay for, Oche was very happy that his favorite daughter Ochania had graduated. Barely 3 months after Ochania had graduated, handsome, successful men had started trooping into Oche's house to ask for Ochania's hand in marriage. It was as though Acheni was invisible. Acheni would always peep and look sadly as young successful men came to visit her twin sister, Ochania. Her father would call her out to bring drinks to entertain their guests, saying, "Acheni, oh yeah, come. Since you're good for nothing, at least come and serve your sister's guest." Oche would say, and Acheni would come in covered in shame to serve Ochania's guest. Ochania's suitors would usually stare at her in shock and disgust. A few months later, Ochania had finally picked one of the men to settle down with. So she got married to her heartthrob, Ame. Ame worked in a very big oil company, so their wedding ceremony was a very lavish one. But Acheni was not allowed to attend, as her sister Ochania said she would make people uncomfortable and embarrass her guests. Acheni was so sad, she wept and even ate more food as usual, just so she could find some comfort. A few months after the wedding, Ochania found out she was pregnant. She and her husband Ame were so happy, and they both shared the good news with Oche, who was also very happy. And as usual, Oche rained curses and insults on Acheni, saying, "Look at your life. You're at home busy eating, and growing fat, while your sister is advancing in life, building a home, and now she's pregnant and expecting a baby. Who do you think will even want to marry you with the way you're looking, eh?" Oche would say, mocking his daughter. And as usual, Acheni would weep and weep profusely. A few months later, Ochania had given birth and had requested her father to send her twin sister Acheni to come and live with her so she can take care of their baby. So she called her father one day and said, "Papa, I'm stressed though. Taking care of a new baby is not an easy job at all. Papa, I was thinking, if Acheni is not so useful to you, can you please send her over to take care of my baby? After all, if not for her, my mother would have been alive to come and take care of me and the baby," Ochania said, sulking. "Ah, my daughter, you don't need to mention it twice. If you need Acheni today, she will be there first thing tomorrow morning," Oche said, trying to pacify his beloved daughter. So Oche called Acheni and said, Oya, pack your bags. You're going to live with your sister since you killed your mother, who would have been the one taking care of your sister now that she has a baby. You will have to go there yourself and take care of your sister and her baby. And if you like, go and disgrace yourself and be eaten like a buffoon. Oche said angrily. But Papa, I do not want to go to Ochanya's house. So Acheni replied angrily. Hey, see this girl. Oh. Did I at any time ask you whether or not you want to go? Eh? You're going and that is final. I did not ask for your opinion. Oche replied angrily. So Acheni left his presence, weeping and crying profusely. So the next day, Acheni was at her sister's house, and that day marked the beginning of another level of premium suffering. Her sister Ochania maltreated her and treated her so badly. She literally treated her like a maid. The day Acheni arrived at Ochania's house, Ochania called Acheni to give her a pep talk and a list of do's and don'ts as though she was a maid, saying, I need you to be awake by 4 a.m. and ensure that the whole house is clean from top to bottom. You need to wash all the 4 toilets every day, whether or not anybody uses them. I need you to dust everywhere properly. I do not want to see a single dirty cloth in this house. If not, you and I are going to have a very big problem. And by 6 a.m., you should be done with all the cleanup. Then make sure you take your bath and wash up all the debts in your body very well. Then you can now set things for me to bathe my baby. And I do not want you in my bedroom for any reason. Have I made myself clear? Ochania said angrily. Yes, I've heard you, Ochania. Acheni replied sadly. So from that day, Acheni would sweep, clean, and do all the chores in the house. She would even carry the baby and feed the baby, while Ochania and her husband Ame slept at night. Acheni was a full-time maid with no pay to her own twin sister. She always cried and wept. She wished that she had died at birth, rather than suffer like this in the hands of her father, now her sister. Even Ochania's husband Ame had also started molesting her. Whenever Ochania was not there, he would touch her inappropriately and even tease her. But whenever Ochania was around, he would talk down on her and mock her, saying, my beautiful wife, how can this ugly, fat, round thing be your blood sister? Not to talk of your twin sister. Are you sure they did not make a mistake at the hospital? Ame would say, laughing. And Ochania would reply and say, my dear husband, I've also noticed that same thought severally as well. Oh, see me now, a full speck and more. See my twin sister. See how she's round, like Michelin tire. Anyway, at least she's useful in keeping the house clean. Ochania would say, and they would both laugh. Acheni would always cry and weep profusely. She wondered if her life would always continue to be like this. She wanted more. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to own businesses. She wanted to have a family. She wanted to be healthy and fit. And she wanted to be free from all the abuse on her by her sister, her father, and now her sister's husband. She had served her father and her sister all her life. Now it looked like she was going to be serving her sister and her husband all her life. Her sister treated her even worse than her father. The only thing that her sister did better was to feed her. But at this point, the excess food she was giving Acheni was not just because she didn't want her to be hungry, but also because she wanted her to remain fat and ugly, so her and her husband could constantly make fun of her. So Acheni continued living with her twin sister and her husband. A few months later, Ochania had returned to work while Acheni stayed at home all day, caring for her baby. However, from the first day Acheni resumed work, Ame would leave his office in the afternoon and come back home, just so he could force himself on Acheni. Acheni could not stop him because he was way stronger than her. And when he was done forcing himself on her, he would dress up and go back to work, while Acheni would cry all day. There was nobody to talk to, neither her father nor sister would believe her. So she kept her mouth shut. And Ame continued abusing her like this for several months. One night, Ame and Ochania had both quarreled during the day, and Ame wanted to feel the warmth of his wife, but she refused him. So after several attempts of trying to beg and cajole Ochania, and Ochania still refused. So he waited for a few minutes when he thought that Ochania was asleep. Then he decided to sneak out into Achieni's room to force himself on her as usual. However, this time Achieni mustered all her strength and screamed her lungs out. She knew that this was the only opportunity that she had to let Ochania know that her husband had been abusing her. At least she thought that if Ochania caught them red-handed, then she would be able to believe her when she tells her that her husband has been abusing her for several months. So Ame screamed with all her strength, and just as she had anticipated, her screams had woken her sister up. So Ochania rushed to find out what was causing the commotion, only to see her husband in Achieni's room. "What's happening here?" Ochania screamed, looking shocked. Is it not your fat, ugly twin sister that is trying to seduce me? I was on my own, and she started seducing me. I wonder what she's thinking, that I will leave my hot, beautiful wife for her fat, round Michelin tire." Ame replied, looking disgusted. It's not true, Ochania. Your husband has been forcing himself on me for several months. He comes back home every afternoon to have his way with me. How can I be the one seducing him in my own room? What is he doing in my own room? He's the one that came to rape me as usual, Achieni said, crying. But Ochania believed her husband instead and started screaming at her sister. "Oh, you took my mother away from me, and now you want to take my husband, Abi? How do you even think my husband will leave me? Look at me now, a speck and more. A full package, and then tries to force himself on you. You're not even his type. You're fat, you're ugly. But I have had enough. You're leaving my house tonight," Ochania said angrily. "I'm telling you the truth, Ochania. Ochania, please, believe me. Where will I go this night? Please, Ochania, don't do this to me," Achieni said, crying. But all her pleas fell on deaf ears, and Ochania and her husband threw Achieni's things and forced her out of their home. Achieni stood in front of their gate at midnight, very afraid. She was crying and weeping. She clutched her bag tightly, as she did not have anywhere to go. Then shortly after, she decided to walk and look for a place to lay her head and sleep. So as she walked, she saw a beautiful car approaching her. She was very afraid, but the car stopped beside her, and a handsome, wealthy man named Emeka. He went down and looked at her. He could see tears and fear written all over her face. And immediately, he had compassion on her and said, "Young lady, why are you out by this time, alone, by yourself? You know it's not safe. My name is Emeka. What's your name? Please come into the car. Let me take you to your destination," Emeka said while looking very worried. "My name is Achieni, sir. I don't have anywhere to go. My sister and her husband threw me out of the house this night, but I cannot come with you, sir. I don't know who you are," Achieni replied, crying. "I promise you that I will not hurt you or do anything untowardly to you. Please, it's not safe out here. Please come in. I will take you to my home. At least spend the night there. Then if you want to go, you can go anywhere you want tomorrow morning, please," Emeka said reassuringly. So Achieni, after much hesitation, hopped into the car and followed Emeka home, but she was still shaking and weeping profusely. So Emeka took Achieni home. Achieni was shocked to see how beautiful his home was. They were welcomed by Adora and Ebere, Achieni's sisters. Achieni was so surprised to see that Adora and Ebere were also fat as her. They both welcomed her warmly. Emeka introduced them to Achieni as his sisters, and immediately she felt at home. Adora and Ebere were so warm. They welcomed her and showed her to her room, and they even gave her a change of clothes and also gave her food. Achieni was so grateful. She felt at home, and that night was the first time in years that she had a very peaceful sleep. So the following day, She narrated all that had happened to Emeka and his sisters, and they felt so sorry for her. Then Emeka said, "You're not going back to your family. Nobody deserves to be treated the way your parents and twin sister treated you. You stay with us until you figure out what you want." And Emeka's sisters, Adora and Ebere, both agreed with their brother. Achieni was so grateful. She felt a sense of relief. And over the next few weeks, for the first time in her life, she experienced what true sisterhood meant. Adora and Ebere treated her like their sister. They spent hours gisting together, they all went shopping together and had so much fun together. They all really liked her and she liked them too. Emeka had observed that she was very intelligent and he was even beginning to fall in love with her. But he hid his feelings from her and his sisters. So Emeka decided that he was going to try his best to help her stand. And then he was going to allow her make the decision on her own, whether or not she liked him too. So after a few days, Emeka called Achieni and asked her what she wanted to do, saying, "Achieni, if money was not a problem, what would you want to do with your life?" Emeka asked. Achieni replied and said, "I would love to be a business consultant, owning several chains of businesses and consulting for businesses as well." Achieni replied. Emeka was very impressed by her response, and this made him even fall more in love with Achieni. So a few months later, Emeka paid for Achieni to apply into the same university that his sisters attended that year, and even paid for a personal tutor to brush her up. So Achieni sat for the entrance exams and passed with flying colors and got admission into the university to study business administration. She was so happy. Emeka and his sisters were also very happy for her. So a few months later, Achieni resumed at the university with Emeka's sisters. She was so happy. Over the next 4 years, Emeka paid for her school fees. She felt like a part of their family. 4 years went by very quickly, and not once had Emeka or his sisters ever talked down on her. Achieni would sometimes remember her father and sister, and she would feel so bad because since the day she was pushed out of her sister's house, neither her sister nor her father had made any effort to look for her, and this hurt Achieni really badly. A few years later, Achieni had graduated from the university with a first class. She was so happy. Emeka and his sisters were also very happy for her. At this point, Emeka could no longer hide his feelings for her, so he made his intentions known and said to her, "I love you so much and I would want to be your husband. Please, Achieni, would you marry me?" Emeka asked. "Yes, of course, I will marry you," Achieni replied excitedly. "But just one more thing. Are you sure you will not stop loving me later because of my weight? I'm very fat too," Achieni asked sadly. "Never. I have always loved fat and thick women. You're my spec. You're everything I want in a woman. I love everything about you. Besides, have you not seen my sisters? They're also fat now," Emeka said, smiling. Achieni was so happy. So a few weeks later, they had a lavish wedding ceremony. Achieni had gained a new family. Emeka, who loved her very much, and now she had 2 new sisters who cherished her. She was so excited. Emeka spoiled and pampered Achieni silly, and they continued to live together happily. A few years later, Emeka and Achieni already had 3 beautiful children, and they were so happy. Achieni had moved on with her life and long forgotten about her father and her twin sister. However, one day Achieni was seated in her home when she saw someone that looked like her twin sister and her father and her husband Emeka walk into the parlor. Immediately Achieni set her eyes on them. She jumped to her feet and said, "What are these wicked people doing here?" Achieni said, shouting angrily, "Please calm down, my love. Your father and sister traced my office and came to see me. They have come to beg for your forgiveness and ask for your help," Emeka said, trying to calm his wife down. "My father and sister care. God forbid. I don't have a father or sister. These ones here, they are not my family members," Achieni said, crying. And immediately, Ochani and her father, Oche, fell to their knees and started pleading with Achieni, saying, "Achieni, please forgive us." They both chorused. Then Oche said, "I was consumed by the grief of losing my wife and transferred my aggression to you. I should never have blamed you for the loss of my wife. I'm so sorry, Achieni," Oche said, crying. "For crying out loud, I was just a baby, Papa. How could I have been responsible for the death of my mother? And you made my life a living hell for over 25 years. And as for you, Ochania, I'm your twin sister. Yet you hated me so much. You joined our father to maltreat me, and you treated me as a maid. And even when you caught your husband abusing me, you accused me of seducing him and threw me out at night. Both of you are not worthy to be called my family," Achieni said, crying. "I'm sorry, Achieni. Please let bygones be bygones," Ochania said, crying. "Bygones kill you there. Bygones cannot be bygones. Please just tell me the reason why the both of you are here and get out of my home and family," Achieni replied angrily. So Ochania narrated how life had been very tough for her and their father Oche, and how her husband Ame and her child had been involved in an accident, and they had spent several months at the hospital, but had finally died after they had spent all their money and savings on the hospital fees. Now Ochania was very poor, and the landlord had even thrown her things out, and she had nowhere to go. Oche, their father, had stopped working a long time ago, as it was Ame that had been taking care of him. But with the misfortune that had befallen Ame, Oche had also been affected, so they were now both very poor. After Achieni listened to all their sad stories, she was more convinced than ever that she wanted nothing to do with them. So she looked at her father and sister and said, "I knew it. So you only remembered me because things are no longer rosy. But like I said, I'm not surprised. I do not want anything to do with you both ever again. But here," Achieni said as she wrote a check of 10 million naira and handed it over to her sister. "Use this to start your life afresh. But this should be the first and last time you ever contact me again. To me, you're both dead," Achieni said, crying, while her husband Emeka comforted her. So Oche and Ochania left her home with their heads buried in shame. Hi besties, it's your girl Omalicha again. Thank you so much for watching my story to the end. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one. Do you think Achieni was wrong for not forgiving her twin sister and her father? If you were in her shoes, will you really let bygones be bygones? Please tell me your opinion in the comment section. I would like to read them. And please support your homegirl Omalicha by subscribing to my channel, liking my videos, and sharing to your loved ones. Now till I come your way again with more interesting stories. Bye.